Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Genesis Home Podcast, where we talk to experts in real estate, finance, business, community, and beyond, covering topics that are important to us. Let's listen in. Hi, everyone. All our episodes of the Genesis Home Podcast is recorded using the Anchor app. If you haven't heard of Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. 1, it's free. 2, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Have a great day, everyone.
Public speaker, certified life coach, entrepreneur, spirit of the man of the great quotes. So how you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, enjoying this beautiful day.
So you speak with such conviction. Was it always like that?
Great question. No, the conviction has truly developed itself in the sense of I've always had a confidence about myself, but it has developed over time because I'm becoming the man that I desire to be. I'm more reassurance of who I am now than I was before, in the sense of I've got to know, Eric Washington, right? And so Eric Washington has learned how to become comfortable with himself. And so that's the beauty of confidence and courage, is learning self. And that's why I speak with such conviction and confidence, because I have got to know me.
Is that what is a factor of what encouraged you to pursue something that is so emotional and public? I mean, public speaking, being a life coach, that's emotional. Is what motivated you to use your approach to your linguistic skills and use it for public speaking or being a life coach?
Great question. It was something. Well, I'll take it back. It's I have a responsibility. If I can, I'd like to explain one of them. It's my responsibility to be a student to life, right? And when you become a student, it is your responsibility as well to pass it to the next generation. It's my responsibility to make my learning skill set for the next generation, because that's what was done for me. To pass on this knowledge and this wisdom to the next generation. So it was a mandate, that I had to pass it down by educating myself, being teachable, and having an understanding that it's not about me. What I'm doing has never been about me. I'm just the mailman that's playing his part. And so I try to approach it that way because it's healthy. It keeps you humble. It allows you to keep the movement flowing. It allows me also to be mission driven. And so it is my responsibility to make sure the next generations have sound knowledge and sound wisdom, and they see a plan of action as well.
Correct, but you could have done that as a professor. You could have done that as a librarian. Or there's so many avenues to take it. What made you say this is it? This is the career. This is my calling.
Yeah, it's to be honest with you, Ms. Parker, it was one of those reality, and I call it my epiphany, to where as a kid growing up, I grew up down south in Polk County, Florida, a small town called Arvindale, right? And in my small town, it's about 15,000 people. Good city, but the city itself, the entrepreneur mindset was never a reality for me in that environment, right? And so growing up without a mother or father, I had some choices to make. And I left home at 18 years old. When I left home at 18 years old, it was the unknown. I lived in the city literally with, like I said earlier, 15, maybe 10 to 15,000, and I moved to California. And I knew at that at that time at 18 years old that life was a lot bigger than myself. And I knew I had a calling. I just didn't know what kind of calling. And once I discovered the calling of I have to serve the next generations in a way that is really unconventional, I heed to the calling with my faith. I'm a faith man, and God was calling me to deep waters. And so I had to answer the call. And once I realized that this call is bigger than myself, and this call was something that was created for me and customized for me before I was ever put on this earth, it literally changed my perspective on how I looked at life. And so I'm here now, right? It's all about serving. And I want to make sure I drive that home to these listeners, that they understand that everything we do in life is not for ourselves. We just happen to be a benefit of it in the process of becoming.
So you believe that there was something inside of you or within. I don't want to say
Mhm.
inside, that sounds weird. But something within that drove you to be a it just the best way I can say is a really good orator. Like you the way you speak, there's a flow to it. You
Mhm.
know how some people say there's a dance? There's a dance.
Right. Right.
So how to go from speaking to life coach? Or is that interconnected for you?
You know what's honestly, to be all to be real transparent with you, I started speaking. I remember I did my first speaking engagement in college at a graduation, and one of my professors told me, "Say, hey, Washington, you have a great voice. It's very soothing. Only thing you have to do is perfect your craft." And this was at like 19 years old, and I've never spoke, but I had a public speaking class that I was taking at that time, and my professor had this belief in me, and I didn't even have it in myself. But I knew when I was talking, I spoke at 19 years old with such transparency and honesty, to where after the graduation, people literally was running to me to like, oh my gosh, I've never heard a, and this is not me trying to brag on myself at all, but this is what happened in this event. And I was just like, oh, okay. But at that moment at 19, I knew there was something, and I knew that I would be probably communicating for the rest of my life. I just didn't know at what capacity, to be quite honest with you.
So public speaking yielded to a life coach support as a business.
Yes, absolutely. And what was so special about life coaching, it really honestly, um, we know it's about serving, your client, but life coaching is a reflection of daily convictions. What does that mean? Um, you have to be able to help others. You have to have a lifestyle of, I stated earlier about being a student to life. You have to have a ultimate confidence. I like to call confidence a knowing system. You have to have a belief, but the belief eventually turns into the knowing. the knowing eventually comes in. I mean, eventually comes into a confident about yourself. See, confidence itself has to be developed. It don't just happen, right? And so for myself, once I became this confident person that I have become, um, it literally made me have a heartbeat to help others because there was a reflection every single day with the studies that I put into this and a experience that comes with this. It literally shaped me to where I wanted to make this to where it can help and help people to revolutionize their mindset because all of this coaching is about making changing the mindset of your narrative, changing it into a mindset that can produce. And this is the key right here: allowing your mindset to work for you. And that literally changed my life. Once I got to that mindset, to understand that my mindset, my will, my grit, my confidence can now work for me. Because at first I was looking and trying to discover, but once I realized that I can now allow this to work for me, that was the game changer. And so that's what I ultimately did. I realized that okay, let me affect this skill set to where it can become a product of who I am in the sense of giving back. And so that's what my life coaching is about. It's about giving giving a value that you can apply on a daily basis because we all have to understand this is that the successful people have a different mindset. That's the difference between the poor man and the poor person and the successful person is that their mindset is wired completely different. That's the only difference between the two. One is activating and moving, and the other one is just sitting. That's the difference between the two.
Now, you said you hit on something that was really interesting. You mentioned the difference between the successful person and the poor person, and the distinction is the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
When you say mindset, do you mean the mindset of how they perceive themselves in this process, or the mindset of what they allow?
The mindset of themselves. And we, Miss Parker, we have to understand that everything starts with self, right? You know, so self has to be developed, right? Self has to have a confidence. It doesn't do me any good if I'm using myself for example. It doesn't do me any good to study but never developing myself, right? It's my experience that is going to help someone. And if I'm not in like for example, if I'm not in love with myself, how can I be in love with my wife or my kids? If I'm not in love with what I'm doing and I'm just doing it for a check or for a cachet of recognition, I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. But if I'm doing it because I've been called, if I'm doing it because I'm in love with it, it now works for me. And so that's the reality of life, right? What you put in is what you get back. And so I just want to encourage someone for a moment. If they're struggling to get their business off the ground, or if they're struggling with, oh, I don't know what to do, and there's something within that individual that they have to just try and let it fall in the way it needs to fall when it comes to let it do what it does and live with those results. And so you have to be active. You truly have to be active. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. The and that's a great way of looking at it, that we hear a lot from history and things like that, about the president, how the buck stops here.
Mhm.
And the way you're mentioning is that whatever you want to do, whatever you want to pursue, it has to start with you first. But for you to succeed, it still has to start with you. You have to be okay with yourself. You have to be, confident, know that you are capable of these great things. So you answered it, but it's still asked. But there is a huge underlying question I have with that. How does someone become a certified life coach?
That's a
How do
good
you
question.
take all that knowledge and say certified? Like, where's that process?
Well, I want, if I could go back for a quick second, I want to mention another thing as far as we was talking about um, we was talking about how it starts with self. I want to be transparent because I feel like this right here is going to help someone. One the one thing that I was doing for myself, I had the spirit of fear for such a while to where it hindered my growth. And so what I mean by it hindered my growth, it got me to a space to where I didn't even get it. I didn't really get to discover who I was because I was so fearful of what everyone else was going to think of me. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so from for me, I had to learn not to worry about what people thought of me in this process as well. So I don't want to leave that out because I know someone, because it's human nature. That's one, that F word is something that we all struggle with, right? And so I want to make sure people understand that fear is going to be there, but at some point you have to face fear as well. So I just want to clear that up real quick. You have to face fear and you have to be able to own it. You have to be able to own it. What I mean by own it is that you have to face it and you have to be able to defeat it. And what defeat comes into is having a knowing system to be able to knock it out the park. And I want to make sure people understand that that's so important and so forth. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up real quick.
I'm glad you did. You know, sometimes we hear the quote all the time. If you are afraid to do it afraid. And by you mentioning the importance, the way how fear can be a motivator or a paralyzer is really important to discuss.
That's so good.
Especially if you have, especially if you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, which entrepreneurs do every day.
Yeah.
Every day we have to do something different. We have to step out of our comfort zone. We have to look at things from different perspectives because it won't work any other way.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely correct. And I always find it fascinating, and maybe it's just, me being weird. I always found it fascinating how more people don't step outside of their box
Mm-hmm.
to learn about that. Because the comfort is not in the known, it really is in the unknown sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does that, the fear complex or the complexity behind fear resonate in someone with a business that literally deals with facing a lot of things sometimes all at once, and a lot of it's probably with your clients?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do you address that, or how do you get them to realize that the fear is really just in your head?
A lot of times when, for myself, from experience working with my clients, it usually take probably a 5 to 10 minute conversation into our conversation to discover that they're afraid by many different avenues, in the sense of emotion and fear are probably two that I run across more than anything else. And the reason why that is so relevant is because those are the two things that we face on a daily basis. And so what I do with our what I try to do with my client is I try to get them to realize that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to step into a realm that you know nothing about. That's what I'm here for. I've went through it for you. Remember, everything I do is for the next generation. Everything that I'm a part of. So I've went through it through my experience. You can't go somewhere if you've never been, right? And so
Right.
one of the things I try my best to do is to let them see who they are through that discovery conversation of, okay, yeah, you've done it this way. You've maximized this mindset that you're in right here, right? Let's try this. You already know what it's like to not to be the person that you need to be, right? I need you to recognize that part. I need you to recognize that the way your habits and what you have allowed your mind to process thus far, I need you to try something else because you've already fully reached your full potential in that mindset. Let's now try this perspective and let's live with that. And
Now,
so again, you redirecting their mindset into something that is bigger than themselves. And a lot of times in this discovery conversation, they are the mind is starting to flow to where it's like, oh, okay, you're right. Like I've done it this way for the last 15 years, 20 years. Let's try this way because that way is not working. You've maximized that perspective. Let's now try this perspective and these ways to see now what it produces. You see how I just explained that and how when you think about it from that perspective, your whole mindset begins to change because there's movement that is taking place. We are now approaching it from a place of a plan of action. That's the key to all of this. And so when we're having these discovery meetings, we're discovering self in this process to revolutionize how you look at yourself. Because if you're able to look at yourself, one of the things we do, we want you to be able to revolutionize your mindset to promote positive relationships. Everything you do in life requires a relationship. Everything you do in life requires a mindset. Am I making sense?
yes.
And so that's why you see I'm really passionate about helping people become. I'm really passionate about that because I know these tools work at the highest level.
Now, this really leads me to like the bigger question of all. And once again, we're still entrepreneurs at the end of the day. So we still have a
100%.
service and we still have, bills to pay.
Right.
Does one, we always talk about the elevator pitch. I know you've heard that. I've heard it. It's a thing. How does one market something like that? Or put it that people start thinking this is someone I'm going to need in my growth?
Yeah. Well, I think life coaching, and a lot of times people say life coaching is a luxury. To a degree, it can be. What I say for those people who are hungry, right? Um, you have to be open. And for those people who are hungry and open to growth and development, they're going to come. They're going to look at the bigger picture. So it's not a pitch, it's a lifestyle. It's the reality that there's something that's truly calling you. And so for those people who say it's a luxury, I'll say it's a voice that will live on forever. What I'm talking about, this is bigger than Eric Washington. And so when I'm talking to them, they can see and feel that this is a priority, that I have to be a part of something that is bigger than myself. So if anything, I'm just being consistent and being transparent to myself to where the person that's for our program, they catch it, they see it. The people who are not necessarily catching it and they're skeptical, maybe at that moment they're just not ready. Because I don't think you have to sell yourself on anything. Let the fruit on your tree speaks for itself. And that's just always been my mindset. I don't change my prices because the economy the inflation is going up. No, I stay true to myself. And what's for me is for me. And that's the mindset that I would encourage a inspiring entrepreneur is that he has to know that he knows in this courage and confidence to where you don't change because society changed. You don't move because life is moving. You move at the pace that you've been created to move at. That's the key. And that goes back to the confident fact. That goes back to being a student. If you're doing everything you know how to do, the world and the universe and God, who is the creator of all of this, he will guide your steps. He will direct your path. And you have to be able to, when you're helping people, you have to realize that it comes back to, you have to have a trust within yourself. I want someone to understand that. What do you say? What do you mean by trust? You got to know that you know within yourself. It goes back to self-love, right? It goes back to self-discovery. It goes back to having that self about yourself, this trust about yourself, that what you're doing is not always for you to know. You're not going to always see the light of the tunnel at the end. You just have to trust yourself in this process to know that it's going to work. It's going to work itself out. And the way you know it's going to work itself out, the way you know that everything is going to fall in place, is by you continue being consistent with yourself. And you have your knowing system in place. You have your mission driven in place, and you have your legacy in place. You notice I named 3 of them, right? Because every great leader has those qualities about themselves. The pitching and the byproduct of what I'm doing, it'll make room for itself. I don't have to worry about finances because I know I do the work, and now the work come looking for me. The work come looking for me.
That's a good way of saying it. The work comes looking for me. And that's really the important part here, because I think sometimes when people say entrepreneur, they think hustle. There's a distinction between having a hustle and building a business, or having a community, which is one thing I will say from what I've learned about you and everything, is the fact that you are so community driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in of itself is an important thing we should really discuss, because when people talk about businesses or things like that, it's not about just having, the sale or having the client or having anything. It's having that community, and having that community once again, it's a lifestyle. You just said it. It's a lifestyle. Part of that lifestyle is having that supportive understanding of what that entails. So for someone who is essentially a support system in of itself,
right?
Because I know people assume life coaches, and we hear that title all the time, especially on social media. You see those little blogs that come up on Instagram.
Right.
The lady walking through the hotel going, "Oh, you can be a life coach just like me." But that's not really what that is. You're basically teaching people how to be comfortable with themselves, love themselves, and start that process. But you're also teaching the importance of community and the role of that for self and for business.
Right.
So
right.
How do you, and I'm asking how, and the how is important, how do you explain that to people who are so disillusioned in the time period of social media? We get all this, we hear about all this stuff in our news. We have so many distractions in this world. How do you center it back to self and community?
Yeah, oh my God, that's a great question. 2 things came to mind when you were speaking. One, many are called but few are chosen, right? And I'll explain it here in a moment. And then 2, my foundation at home. It all starts in that community first. My wife and my beautiful kids, and then secondly, knowing that that what, I've been called to do this, no matter what. And so when you're building a community, it starts at home first and foremost, right? And I always, I know that to be true. Why? Because I'm experiencing, even with me talking with you, and it goes back to self-love, in the sense of, I'm so in love with myself, in the sense of the confident factor. Love naturally wants to share itself. I want people to understand that when you have this love affair about yourself first, as far as a confident, a knowing. I keep saying that because I feel like someone needs to hear that. It goes back to, you have to be able to know within who you are, this is what I need to do. This is what I've been called to do. And that's a byproduct of my family. And my family, are able to benefit from me because I continue being consistent with myself. And then so it goes beyond the family to where now it's to friends and family to where they see how I live, right? They see how I treat my wife. They see how I treat my kids. And then I'm so kind to where my friends and my family are able to benefit from it. And I'm okay to learn from others because it takes a village to be impactful, right? It takes minds like yourself, Miss Parker, that are engaging questions to challenge me and to penetrate within my thinking process to where, okay, like that's a new word, or that she's teaching me. See, on this conversation, I know you've been asking me a lot of questions, but listening to you talk so confident, you have actually inspired me to be a better person just in our conversation, right? And so it starts there. It starts with self. It starts at home with family, and then it's the investing back into the community because all successful people have a community. I want people to understand that, and you have to be able to be at a space to where you can be teachable and be willing to be recreated in the sense of a renewing every single day. And I think that's the game changer for me is that every single day I have this mindset and discipline about myself to where when I get up every single day, I'm thinking about how can I improve in this department? How can I get better in this department? And I think again, it's a constant learning process of getting to know myself. But I think I don't want to lose I don't want to lose our viewers real quick. The key to all of this, if you able to grow within yourself, that's what allows the community to develop and grow. I want you to understand that part of it. As if you develop self and you add value to self, now you automatically add value to the world. You automatically add value to the communities that you'll be a part of because you have allowed the universe to recognize that okay, the work that you've put in, you're now going to benefit from it in all aspects of your life. And that's the beauty of self discovery. That's the beauty of positive mind thinking. That's the beauty of all of this.
You said something that was really interesting. You talked about learning, and this entire conversation, the one thing I did notice that you use confidence and learning. So being a student.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I think we should discuss, and both of us had this conversation before we both met on another podcast, is the distinction between confidence and arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've seen this in your experience. How do you let them know the distinction between the two when building something for self?
That's a great question. Because a person who's humble, they have a gentleness about themselves. They have a kind about themselves. And they have a energy that manifests itself in that very moment to allow people to be comfortable, right? It's very enticing um, energy that it just kind of draws you in, and that comes with practice, right? And so that's the beauty of all of it is that you know the difference between I've been around people who are very successful but they're very you can feel their negative energy. I don't even like to call it arrogance. You can feel their energy, right? And I don't want to be a part of that. I don't even care if they have tools that I'm needing. I will go find it somewhere else. And so and then I've been around people who are very humble, right? And they're very, very successful, and they have this 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 love that is so welcome. It welcomes you in. And it's like, wow, I want to be connected to that. Because those people that know themselves, they know the difference between confidence and negativity. Because when you're confident and you're positive, you always shine over negativity. It's like the light and it's like the light in darkness. Like the light always shows what people's truth. And so I see it in when I talk. And another thing that I really do, I a person that's confident, they have a meekness about themselves. I don't want to leave that out. I want someone to understand that a person that's confident have a meekness about themselves. Other words, they are very in tune with how to control their emotions. Mm. I want
Yeah.
you to think about that for a minute, Miss Parker. Like they know how to control their emotions. They're settled. There's a difference in like that arrogant person, that person that's just confident. They have this meekness about themselves that literally is so attractive. So I hope that can answer your question.
It did. There. I know it sounds like really SAT thing, but I really will say there's no such thing as right or wrong answers. It's how you view not just what you do, but the ripple effect that comes from that. Because
Yeah,
what you do
absolutely.
is really inspiring. And it's not, and it really does change. Remember, I said we're learning from each other during this conversation. And one thing I did learn from this so far is the fact that for you, life coach has nothing to do with the title or the image of what that looks like. The phrase or the setup for a life coach is more about for you encouraging people to, one, look within, and two, how to be how to be that person that years down the line they can look back and say, I've learned. They
Mm.
can look back and say, I've experienced. They can look back and say, I've grown. And I'm going to be honest with you, I looked up life coach
Mm-hmm.
before this,
Mm-hmm.
and none of this was on there. I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about, we're going to be in your office every 15 seconds and sit there with you with the board of directors and, focus your energy. I
Mm-hmm.
never really read anything or heard anything about this being a way for you to channel and tap into something that you never knew existed, or build
Mm-hmm.
something yourself you never knew was possible. It's that distinction between the successful person and the person who's not as successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is really awesome, and thank you so much for coming on, because I also have a social media question.
Okay.
How do you, because a lot of this is very intimate, learning about yourself is an intimate thing.
Mm-hmm.
Growth is an intimate thing. These are things that are not often public. So how do you balance something that is considered intimate with
Mm-hmm.
the consistency or the craziness of social media? Because there's moments where social media is great. I mean, it lets us know that there's a taco place down the block, or
Right.
things like that. But for anything involving self and growth and reflection,
Mm-hmm.
it tends to get it gets choppy. So how does someone like you, because I've seen you on social media, I've seen your quotes, and once again, you talk with such conviction. How do you balance yourself while encouraging others at the same time with social media?
That's another great question. Great question. Excuse me, Miss Parker. The key to it all is, I hear the greats say this, and I've applied this to my life. It really goes back to managing self. Managing self. You say, what does that mean, Eric? Managing self. There's a balance um, that's required for those that want to be successful at a high level. And patience is another tool that I practice, right? Um, Balancing, realizing that what's a priority and what's not, realizing that I am a voice that speaks life into humans' minds, right? And so it's my responsibility to not just live it. It's my responsibility to have a understanding of balance. Before I'm an entrepreneur, before I am a husband, I am a man of faith. I'm a man of God, and it starts with the center of being accountable. That's the key right here, Miss Parker. Being accountable to myself. And when you are accountable to yourself, you're accountable to others. I talked about managing. I manage my life accordingly because for me to be the person that I need to be, I have to have an accountability system. That's what I want to talk about. If we got a couple minutes, can I talk about that for a moment?
Oh, this is your episode.
Well, it's really about I see so many people who are on social media, and a lot of times they're talking about whatever they want to talk about. I'm not going to call no one out. That's not my place. But what I know is that they have no accountability system, and then eventually they fall off the face of the earth. A lot of times, why those people fall off is because they didn't build their themselves to have a stability that can hold them when they're tested, and so with the world in the sense of what's the latest and greatest. But the greats, if we look at the greats, like, I'm gonna just drop names, the Tony Robbins of the world, or E.T., or Tony Gaskins, or a Icky Johnson, and all those great men. Or we can't forget about Les Brown. He's a legend. He's a legend. um, all of those greats, they have a self understanding about being balanced. They talk about it. They talk about they be very vulnerable. See, when you have accountability with self, you able to put content that is not just relatable, but it's who you are. And so they're accountable to themselves, and they're mission driven, and they have a confidence system, and they have a legacy system. And so if I can just stop right there in that regards, I want to talk about legacy real quick. You said, how do you stay balanced in this sense, on social media and with family life and all that? The last thing I want to leave, if when people hear this, is that I I'm always thinking about the next generation. I'm always not just thinking about it, but everything I'm doing, I'm passing the baton to leaving my legacy. See, this is the great thing about a legacy, that we always talk about how the legacy it lives forever. That's great. We want the legacy to live forever, but I'm also responsible for when the legacy lives forever. When I leave the earth, I now leave empty. Mm. What do you mean by leave empty? Because I've given everything to the next generations. Everything that I was a part of, I have now given to the next generation. That's real legacy right there. I'm going to leave this world empty. And when I leave this world empty, balance have taught me how to leave this world empty. You see what I'm saying? And so that's the bigger picture to leaving a legacy, is to where my kids, they will be more blessed than ever before. But most importantly, when I'm leaving the earth, I'm going to leave the earth empty, because I've done and I've maximized and I've operated at a high level, and I was mission driven, and I had the confidence to do it. And now I can leave the world empty. And I think if I could tell any life coach, don't get into life coaching because it's good money. Because if you have, like you said earlier, if you have a hustle mentality instead of a generational consistency of wealth, that what's the difference between the two? Because there's plenty of people that win the lotto, and then they're rich in the moment, right then and there, but 10 years when there's no longevity, because they didn't build it the right way, or they didn't apply the resources that they initially got to have it to where it works for them. So if you're trying to be a life coach and you are doing it for the money, or doing it for clout, or doing it for whatever reason, it's not the real reason, don't get involved, because it eventually exposes you. That's the reality. And so I do this because I've been called. I do this because I know I have the experience to help others, and I know that this is not about me. And so legacy is all about leaving it to the next generation. But as a coach, it's my responsibility to leave this world empty. And if I don't leave empty, I have sold the next generation short. And I refuse to do that because there are too many people that has been set aside for me to help. I yield the mic on that regards.
The mic is I'm like speechless right now. Also, I think you just inspired me to do another episode. I'm gonna message you back later because now I really want to do one on legacy and business.
Yeah.
Because we don't have that conversation. We keep hearing how to build a business, how to build a brand, how to do this, but we don't discuss legacy. We really don't, and we really don't discuss it enough. And hearing it from someone who understands the soul of a person. So the issue is that once again, we hear about life coaching a lot. It's not, we hear it here in real estate, but we never really hear about the soul of a person. And the great thing about you, and one thing I hear from this entire conversation is you care about the person's core, who they are as a person versus your projection of that. Because that's what got them into this best, that they're projecting their issues or their fears or their things, and they're not realizing that that's not the core. That's not who they really are. There's so much more than what their fear is telling them.
Right. And Ms. Parker, real quick, I want to say this before. I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to say this real quick as well, if you don't mind. And the last thing I want to leave for those that are listening to this is being a life coach is not about numbers. And what I mean by that is I recommend this from the bottom of my heart, because again, if you're money driven, you're in the wrong industry. But this is the most important thing, is that a life coach is not, his success is not he or she's success is not based on how many clients they get per day. A life coach is ultimately to add value. And I don't recommend a life coach that has 10 sessions a day, 8 sessions a day, 5 sessions. That to me, in my opinion, you're driving home to get the numbers. And we're not built as humans to take on 5 different personalities per day. I don't care who you are. I don't care what PhD you have. I don't care what book you've read. We're not built that way. In other words, it's a responsibility to give your client the best version of you. And I see it so much to where people are charging $100 a session, or they're charging $50. No, you're bigger than that. And what I mean by bigger than that is that we have to understand, when we are taking on somebody's soul, we're literally allowing that to be manifest in your life. And you're not built to think that you're strong enough to be able to handle multiple personalities per day, because you're not giving them the best version. They become a number game. It's a number to you and not a service of value. And I want to make sure I get that point across, because I see it all over our country where people are so caught up in numbers, or caught up on having so many clients per day, to where they're burnt out. It's like a therapist. They get burnt out. You're taking on all of this negative and you're trying to help and so forth, but you can only help so much per day. And so I want to encourage someone, don't go in it for the numbers. Don't go in it in the sense of you're trying to get $100 clients because you're starting off new. Know your worth. And you need to charge competitive pricing. I don't care if you just started out. You have to be true to yourself. And so, because if not, Miss Parker, they get burned out and then they on to the next. And then we realize through discovery that guess what? They're not built for it. They wasn't caught. They were just doing it because it was a quick hustle. So I want to encourage someone, don't do it because you want to get numbers. Do it because this is a calling. Do it because you have some value that you can add to someone's life. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Parker.
No, that's perfect. And that is a great way to end this. I have like no words. I'm speechless. Oh, we really got to talk again. We do have to talk again. This is so awesome. We got to do this again.
Absolutely.
This is really good. Like once again, when I met you, you just, the way you talk, you just draw people in. But I have learned so much from that podcast and from this one. It's just, thank you for coming on. And please let people know where they can find you.
Yes, for sure. Instagram, spoken by Eric. Instagram spoken by Eric. They can also hit me up on my email. What is it? It's Eric Speaks Inc. at Gmail. Eric Speaks Inc. at gmail.com. And yeah, reach out. I am offering my booking is open for sessions right now. Hit me up on my link tree, spoken by Eric, or just go on my IG at spoken by Eric, and you can get in contact with me that way. I would like to help those that are wanting to help themselves. I just want to make that clear. And so again, at spoken by Eric Gmail. So hit me up, and I'd love to help you in any way as possible. And so, yeah, love you guys, and blessings to all of you guys. And just know that, trust the process, and it'll work itself out.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Washington, for coming on. You will be back. I'm making that's got to be a thing. You will be back. So I will talk to everyone later. This is the Genesis Home Podcast. Bye.